But then as I got older, I realized that like, and there was a lot of things that I would replicate. I remember the first time I took one of my brother's drawings to school and I said it was mine. Because he could draw really well.
Yeah.
And I took it to school. And so my friends, we literally made copies and scans so everybody could have them. So I'm passing them out to different people. I'm pretty sure I could have made a business out of it. I could have been selling them.
You could have finessed.
But the currency that like was more important to me at that point in my life was being valued.
Yeah.
And so if I could give something that was valuable, such as this piece of art that maybe I didn't create, it still made me feel valuable.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I remember giving those things. And so anyways, I remember even tracing over some of my brother's drawings or even taking some of his words or different like jokes that I saw hit. And I'd be like, I'm gonna do that at my school.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use a similar lingo or whatever else. And what ended up happening was, as I always tell Michaela this with like creating is like, you replicate so that you can originate. And so sometimes it starts off with like you replicating something that you've seen that then gives way and birth to something original that you'll do later on.
Yeah.
The real challenge is, the tension is, you get stuck replicating. And if I was stuck still doing the same things as my brother was doing, still creating in the same way that he was doing, then it would become a boundary. But at that point, it was a catalyst. It was a slingshot into my destiny. It was a slingshot into my purpose, into a moment in my life where I am now, where I can originate easily. I can just come up with new ideas. But I had to like replicate before I could get to a place where I could actually originate.
Yeah.
And it takes an intentionality of knowing what you're replicating.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I'm replicating the exact drawing, but how my brother would draw details would then become how I was detailed. Or how my brother took time to create for friends would then become how I created for friends or whatever else. So there was portions of it that I would replicate that could then become an original idea that still lived through me. So some of those replicated things that I did from him are still living through me, but it's not copy word for word, picture for picture, dress for dress, anything else like that.
Okay.
And so, I think it really developed my character subconsciously.
Yeah. Subconsciously, like, and just not even that's so like for me, it's always interesting to hear people that say stuff like that, or like, hey, I was doing this, or I was trying to copy this person, because like for me, I didn't have, like, I have an older brother, but we didn't necessarily grow up together, like same school, same household, same, it's a half brother. So for me, it's like when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, dang, that's crazy. Like, because like you said, third grade. Like for me, third grade, bro, I don't even know what was going on in third grade. Like you asked me what I had last week for lunch, or like I don't even remember. Like so, it's always. That's what I mean by like I like to get to know people, right? Get to hear their story because it's so interesting to hear. Like, bro, third grade, bro. Like, what was I doing in third grade, bro? Bro, in third grade, my teacher hit me. That's how bad I was.
Jeez.
Like,
you must have been bad.
I was bad. I got her fired, I think, or on suspension or something. It was something, but like I was
enough.
She had enough. She gave me a little love tap on the head, and I thought it was fine. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't even think nothing of it until I told my mom, and she was like, "What?" And she made me tell the principal. That's a whole other thing. But so it's just funny to hear people like subconsciously at third grade, I made the decision. I'm like, bro, at third grade, I was getting 2 pieces by my teachers, bro. Like,
right.
So that's dope. That's dope.
Yeah.
And that's cool. So I guess that would like bring me to my next question. Throughout all that, did you grow up in the faith? Yeah. Were you introduced to Christ at an early age? Was your family Christian? Were they not Christian? Or how did that go?
Yeah, straight out, like right out of the gate, man.
Right out the gate. Okay.
Out of the womb, bro.
Yes,
I'm going
sir.
to church, bro. So yes. All throughout that time, I grew up in the faith. Now, if you ask me like how authentic and how real that faith was, maybe it wasn't as real and authentic. But here's the value of it. Whether at that young of an age I understood or I didn't, the values that I learned from growing up in a Christian household, to be generous, to have compassion, to go the extra mile for a friend or a family member, or even someone that doesn't like you, someone who hates you. Those were values that I learned. And so, like, whether I was sold out for Christ, and everybody has that story about, well, I was just a lukewarm Christian. And it's like, but the power of Jesus is still transforming.
Yeah.
And so it's whether I was making the conscious decision and like I really was sold out. Like I understand what a level of being sold out is now, but at that level, the depth at which I was at was appropriate for that level. But there was, I think one of the really big defining moments as far as like my faith growing up was actually when I started acknowledging that my faith looked a little bit different than other people's.
Okay.
When I started asking questions.
That we're not all the same, or we're not all on the same like path, or all on the same.
Yeah. Like
Like your walk doesn't look like mine.
no, it doesn't. And I think that for a long time I didn't think that that was possible.
So how did the asking questions go for you? Like when you say you start asking questions, like how did that go? How did they interpret that?
Well, I started asking them in my head first.
Okay.
Then I started asking people, but then people got frustrated. People didn't like the questions I was asking. Their response a lot of times was, it just is this way.
Yeah.
And I think at that point in my life, I just couldn't understand that. And I was leading, maybe even at a high capacity in my church, or even I was always volunteering. As soon as I got out of elementary, I was volunteering with the kids. I was doing something. I was always moving. I was always showing up early. I was always setting something up. There was always something to be done, and I loved that. But there was always the questions that were going through my mind, like, okay, but is this really real? Like this doesn't, like and it frustrated me that other people could accept Jesus easier than me. They could accept the truths that were being spoken in church way easier than I could. And it frustrated me because I was like, why can't I get over this hurdle of believing in a God who's good when bad things are happening in the world? Why can't I get over this hurdle of believing in this God when there's so many other different religions and in so many other different ways? Why can't I get over this hurdle of believing in this God that's completely invisible and everyone is expected to just be okay with that?
Yeah.
And just to go with it. And so as I began to ask these questions, people didn't really like that I was asking these questions. And a lot of times it would create debate and arguments. And I believe that partially the enemy was using some of like the way that I was going about it in the wrong way, because since I was frustrated that other people weren't asking the same questions as me, I was wanting to bring them into my pain. I was wanting to bring them into my struggle.
Yeah.
And I was like, y'all, why aren't you? So initially, like essentially what I was saying was, why aren't y'all asking the same questions? Like, why aren't y'all struggling with this? But I think that as I grew and I got older, I realized that was for me.
Yeah.
Like God was having me ask those questions so that he could develop a more intimate relationship with me. And like now, because of it, I love the mind. I got my degree in Christian studies and psychology because I always tell people, I find the brain to be so fascinating, but I love Jesus. And so even in school, I remember even being in school asking some very serious questions and thinking to myself, how can I be in school, going to school for Christian studies, but still like on the other side looking at psychology, groupthink, some of these other psychological principles that seem like they could be at play within the church and could be even motivation for why people are believing in God. I'm like, wait, hold up. These two things, there's so much tension. And I was like living in between the tension of it. And so at one point in my life, it was, this is where God is falling short. And then I feel like in a moment when I was in school, it turned and it was like, no, this is where my mind falls short.
Yeah.
And this is where God made up for it. And I realized that the highest relationship that we can have with the God of the universe doesn't always happen in our mind. If that makes sense. I know it's kind of it's an interesting thought,
yeah.
But like our minds can so easily be compromised. My emotions, I was telling Yomi even the other day, my mind can be compromised. My emotions can be compromised. My physical body can be compromised. And so my level of truth cannot be based on what my mind can understand. And so I think that it took a long, painful journey for me to get to that place where now I can ask questions and where I feel like the Lord reveals things to me and I have the discernment, and it created a deeper relationship with Jesus that wasn't just go through the motions. I could never just go through the motions.
I think it's that's something that I've struggled with because I kind of think the same way as you. Like I'm always asking why.
Yeah.
And I just genuinely want to know. And so I think it's like for me when I was growing up, I was asking the questions like, why do we have to dress up for church, right?
Yeah.
At least in the church that I was in at the time. Oh, because such and such. But why though? Like why? You're not telling me why.
Right.
And it came across as like, I guess, rebellious, or that's how they took it. But like, I think we just, besides like the dress code part, just in general, right? Like we just genuinely want to know.
Yeah.
I think in our generation, right? Like Gen Z, millennials, like I think they're asking the questions that nobody really cared to ask.
Yeah.
Previous generations, it was just like, this is the way we've always done it,
Yeah.
and it's worked, and that's great. But I think like with millennials and Gen Z, like having all the information we could possibly need
Yeah.
in a second, right?
Yeah.
We don't. Like if you're not gonna tell us why, okay, cool, we'll just leave the church and we'll just Google it ourselves, whatever,
Yeah,
however that goes.
Sure.
And I think there's something that just doesn't sit right with us as a generation or as people to just accept that God's ways and His thoughts are higher than ours.
Yeah.
Like I saw this thing, this quote that said, talking about how God's ways and thoughts are higher than ours,
Yeah.
and it was the distance that the sun is from the earth, and it's like so many million miles or whatever it is, right? So if if that's how far the sun is from the earth, just imagine like God. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no, you wouldn't be able to calculate it.
Yeah.
And so there is some things where you just gotta be like,
Yeah.
it's just God and it's just His ways that are higher than mine.
Yeah.
Like it's just not, like there's just some things where we just, like how you said, right? My mind is falling short.
Yeah.
God is not falling short with the answers.
No.
Because He could give us all the answers and we'd probably die of overwhelmingness of
Yeah.
the presence of God and His knowledge. Like we
Right.
would die. You know what I'm saying? It's just too
Right.
much.
Right.
So it's interesting, and I think it's really cool that you say that, right?
Yeah.
Like we forget that it's actually us that are falling short. Like
Yeah,
God
yeah.
has all the answers, right?
Yeah.
And He doesn't really owe us anything. So when it comes to that point where it's like we hit like a wall,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remind people, right, or to remember, like even as a believer or as believers and non-believers,
Yeah.
like hey, there's just a point where like there's literally like a cap. Like we're human for a reason, right? Like
Yeah,
there's like a
yeah.
cap, and it's just like God is just as much as I don't want to accept it.
Yeah.
God takes it from here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that because Gen Z and this generation is asking so many questions, I believe now is one of the greatest opportunities for people to actually experience Jesus. Like to actually develop a real deep, intimate relationship with Jesus. They're saying that this generation right now is the most spiritual generation, meaning that they're the most open to spiritual encounters.
I don't know if you're on TikTok or not to interrupt you.
No,
but
no.
every other scroll
Yeah.
on the For You page
Yeah.
is somebody within our age,
Yeah.
millennial Gen Z, doing like tarot cards, New Ageism,
Right.
something with spirituality.
Right.
And I've never seen so many people doing that in my
Yes.
life.
Yes.
And
It's
you
everywhere.
got I'll click on them every once in a while just to see what people are commenting.
Yeah.
And you got people that are commenting on there that are desperate. Like
Yeah.
you got people commenting on there that are like, "Hey, choose my name, choose my name." I've been like I saw one that really like bothered me, and it
Yeah.
said, "I've been wanting a kid for 8 years. Can you pick my name so I can have a kid?" And I'm just like, "Whoa!" Like
Dang. Yeah.
these
yeah.
people are desperate. These people like they need Jesus. They need something, because like a lot of people don't see it this way. Like New Ageism and all that stuff and all the tarot card reading. Like, well, whatever comes out of that, like I truly believe that it's real, right? I don't put my faith in that, but like I always tell people, like the spiritual realm is so real.
Yeah.
And it's like, what side are you on? Which one do you want to play?
Sure. And I think that when people taste Jesus, they'll see. Like even no matter how great all the other things are, energy, crystals, blah, 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 all the different things that people are crediting and saying, man, this is changing my life. Like when they taste Jesus, it's like if you ate McDonald's chicken nuggets for your whole entire life, you'd be happy and satisfied with it. But if you tasted Chick-fil-A, you'd be like, wait, hold up. There's something different about this. Like this
They
is,
groom their chickens a little different over
yeah,
here.
this is a little different. Like this is good. And so I'm not intimidated by the spirituality of this generation, or that they're seeking out in so many different ways. I'm actually motivated. I'm like excited about it, because I'm like, well, as soon as you taste and see and you taste Jesus, then that'll change for you. But I think a lot of people end up tasting the church and they think that's Jesus and they run away.
I was just about to ask you that, right? So why does it seem like, even though they're so open to spirituality, why does it seem like, but not Jesus, not God?
Right.
Not the God you're talking about.
Right. And I think it is because for so long in the past, there has been this negative association with the church. And I